can we just put our hands together again properly for the President of CG, Rohinton Medora. So it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be the Member of Parliament for the riding of Waterloo. I can tell you that my colleagues, Raj Saini from Kitchener Centre, Marwan Tabera from Kitchener South Hespeler, as well as Brian May from Cambridge, were really pleased to hear that Minister Gould accepted our invitation to come here tonight. So when it comes to defending our democracy and preparing for federal election 2019, we know that there are many concerns and anxieties to ensure that our democracy remains ours. We want to ensure that it is Canadians that decide what government is elected for Canada. So when I had heard that Minister Gould was traveling the country to have these conversations, I extended an invitation to her to come here, right here in the Waterloo region. And there is no better place than CG to attend because we have been doing quite a bit of work on this issue prior to it being a global crisis, if I might say so myself. So we know that in other countries, this has been a hot topic, and I know that there are many ideas and innovative solutions, as well as questions, comments, and concerns that have been coming to my office, as well as the offices of my colleagues. So we want to ensure that you had the opportunity to have a direct conversation with the minister herself. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was really strategic when it came to the mandate letters that he provided to each of ourselves. And when it came to the mandate letter that he provided Minister Karina Gould, he knew that there were concerns and anxieties that we needed to address. And that's why he chose no better person than the person for the Member of Parliament for Burlington. She is from that community and represents them oh so well. And it doesn't matter where I meet someone from Burlington, Ontario, they always talk about the fabulous representation they have. This individual has been able to gain notoriety, I would say, because of her age. She is a young individual. She is the first woman cabinet minister, sitting cabinet minister, to actually give birth to a child and have that child with her in the House of Commons. And Oliver is all of our child. I say that he is Canada's love child. He is my nephew, and I'm always excited to see him. Unfortunately, he's not here with us today, but we thank him and we thank Karina's husband for allowing us to have Minister Gould here with us tonight. So without further ado, please put your hands together for Minister Karina Gould, Minister of Democratic Institutions.
So thank you so much, Bardish, for that wonderful introduction. And I should say that Bardish, not only is she the government House Leader and the Member of Parliament for Waterloo, but she's also the #1 babysitter in the House of Commons. And Oliver has great affection for her. So it's really wonderful to be here. And you should note that when we were doing our 30-hour voting marathon, the sweatshirt that she was wearing was the Waterloo Airport. And it was great because, it's YK, yeah. And everyone on all sides of the house kept asking her, what does that mean? So, every 15 minutes or so, she got to talk about Waterloo in the House of Commons. So it was a great, great strategy on her part. I am so delighted to be here, and I want to start off by thanking CG for having me back. I was privileged to be here in August last summer talking about this very issue as we were working to build our plan to protect Canadian democracy. And we had an excellent roundtable with academics based here and across the region to talk about some of the intersections between technology and democracy and how we can really ensure that those values that we hold dear to ourselves are upheld regardless of what the technology is that's coming on the horizon. And what better place to do that than right here at CG, where you're thinking about these issues in such a deep way. So thank you so much to everyone for having me back here to talk about our plan moving forward, and then also to have a conversation about what we're doing and what some of the other challenges are that are on the horizon. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have. I guess let's start off, though, by framing the problem. When I got my mandate letter, it said, protect the federal election from foreign cyber interference. And that was in January of 2017. Does anyone remember what happened in November 2016? Yeah. So all of a sudden, something that had never been on our minds was very present. And our understanding and my understanding of that issue has changed dramatically over the past 2 years. And it's interesting because at the time that I got my mandate letter that I was appointed to this position, we were quite simply thinking about hack and leaks. We were thinking about the Clinton emails. We were thinking about the hack into the DNC in the United States. And that was kind of the extent of the issue as we understood it. And so my initial action was to work with the Communications and Security Establishment, our Signals Intelligence Agency, to ensure that we were providing advice and guidance to political parties on how best to protect themselves, because that was the target. The target was getting into political party systems. And I'm sure you recall just a couple months later, there was the French presidential election, and there were the Macron leaks. And something really interesting happened during the French presidential election in that France was prepared. And the French government, actually in the fall of 2016, started working with political parties to get them prepared for what this could look like. So we decided we would do the same thing in Canada. And then we started to dig a little bit more, and we started to uncover even more of what was going on with regards to foreign interference in elections. And we started to understand the problem a bit deeper in the role of social media and how digital communications were facilitating not only the communication between individuals for democratic purposes, but also in ways that were undermining democracy. And we started to understand that it was the very tools of democracy that were being used against democracy itself. And I'm sure you remember a couple months later, there was a referendum in the UK. And about a year ago, we learned about Cambridge Analytica, and we learned about how Facebook and Twitter and platforms even like Pinterest and Reddit were kind of vehicles for foreign actors to try and confuse the message, to try and create chaos or disinformation campaigns to really target the individuals who hold the power in democracies, and those are voters. And so we started to have a bigger picture understanding of what the issue at hand was. And I would say that we still don't fully have a grasp on it, because I'm sure there's going to be things that we continue to learn as we continue to change and as we continue to highlight what we know some of the other issues are. Foreign actors and malicious actors are going to use new techniques and new things, because sometimes people ask me, well, how didn't you know about this? Well, covert operations by their very nature are covert and designed for us not to know or not to understand. But we've learned a lot. And so part of that learning has reflected in two important pieces of work that we've put forward over the past couple of months. The first being the update to the Elections Act, so Bill C-76, which received royal assent in December of last year. And that piece of legislation it does many important things, but it does a couple of important things with regards specifically to protecting our democracy. The first is that it requires social media platforms to maintain an ad registry. And so one of the things that we learned through, these 3 electoral events that I mentioned was the use of advertising on social media to try and share a message with voters and to try and increase messaging and specific targeting. And so having an ad registry will require all of these different social media platforms to actually maintain those ads so that people can go and see them, they can see who paid for them, and they can see more information about that, which I think is important. The second one is knowingly banning social media platforms for accepting advertising from foreign sources. That is another really important issue. At first, the social media platform said, well, we don't even know that this is happening. Well, they're receiving the money, and of course they're keeping track of it. So of course they know where it's coming from, and they can take steps to address that. These two things are the first time that we have regulated social media platforms with regards to elections. And as far as I know, these 2 items have not been done elsewhere in the world. Now other countries are starting to look at how else they can do it, and other countries are taking different approaches. But I think this is really important for our election space and for the integrity and the transparency of our elections, particularly when it comes to political advertising. We also strengthened third-party rules with regards to what they can spend money on, how they can spend it, and the transparency of where that money is coming from. And we've also enhanced the enforcement powers of the Commissioner of Canada Elections. So the Commissioner now has the authority to lay charges, but also to compel testimony if they are conducting an investigation, which are two things that will really strengthen our ability to enforce our electoral laws. And there's many other things that happen in C-76 that I'd be happy to talk about, but these are the ones that specifically relate to this issue. And then on January 30th of this year, myself, alongside my colleagues, Minister Sajjan, the Minister of Defence, and Minister Goodale, the Minister of Public Safety, announced our plan to protect Canadian democracy in the upcoming election. And this plan is based on 4 pillars: citizen preparedness, organizational resilience, protection from cyber threats specifically, and working with social media platforms. With regards to the first one, citizen preparedness, this was the #1 thing that came up in all of my conversations with experts and colleagues around the world, that the most effective protection against foreign interference is a resilient and a prepared citizenry. So we did 2 things. First, we've invested $7 million in digital media and civic literacy campaigns, because the best way that it was explained to me by an expert in this field is that until the advent of social media, we had very clear markers for how to distinguish trustworthy information. We'd walk into a magazine stand and we could see clearly, here's the stuff on sports, here's the stuff on science, oh, that's satire. And we had really clear indicators of what information was, where it was coming from, and whether or not it could be trusted. Fast forward to today, and on social media, we don't have those clear indicators as much. And so people will often receive information not necessarily checking the source and sharing it right away. And so how can we reach out to citizens and Canadians who are very smart, capable individuals and talk about where those sources are and how to be critical of what we're seeing online? The second piece is with regards to what we're calling the Critical Incident Election Public Protocol. That's a bit of a mouthful, so we'll call it the protocol. And basically what that is a clear mechanism to inform Canadians should something happen during the election that is so significant that it would compromise the ability to have a free and fair election. One of the things that we saw in the United States in the 2016 presidential election was that there was a lot of bureaucratic inertia, because nobody wanted to be seen as influencing the outcome of the election, so therefore they didn't talk about the real foreign interference that they were seeing in the months leading up to the election. And we want to avoid that here in Canada. And so we drew on examples, for example, in France, where they have something called the Conseil d'État, which during the Macron leaks came out right away and said, don't report on this. This is a Russian hack. This is something that will compromise the election if we share it further. And so we haven't gone quite as far as what they did in France, but I think this is a really important process to have established internally within the government so that Canadians can trust both the message that is being shared and the messenger of where it's coming from. Hopefully, we'll never have to use it, but we at least have a process in place should the event occur. The second pillar, with regards to organizational resilience, is how do we prepare our institutions? So the CSE is providing direct support to Elections Canada to make sure that their systems are protected, to make sure they know what to do and are doing everything they can to protect themselves from cyber threats. And then we also extended, as I mentioned at the beginning, this expertise and this relationship to the different political parties. And the other thing that we announced on January 30th is that each of the political parties, the leaders of the political parties represented in the House of Commons, as well as up to 3 of their key campaign staff, are eligible for security clearance so that they can get regular briefings from our security agencies so that we have a way to share information in a trusted forum that they know that this information is coming from our public servants and our public safety agencies. The third pillar, with regards to protecting against cybersecurity, was the creation of what we're calling the Site Task Force, which brings together in one little room the RCMP, Global Affairs Canada, CSIS, and CSE to actually monitor this space for the first time. Because frankly, although foreign interference has always existed